Good day and welcome to the IEEE Computer Society's presentation on When Cloud Recovery Will Save the Day and When It Won't by Jason Snook. This webinar is proudly sponsored by Quorum. My name is Amir and I'll be moderating today's presentation. At the end of our presentation, we will have time for questions. As questions occur to you, please type them into the box provided and press the button, the submit button. You do not need to wait until the end of the presentation. You can also download the slides from the resource widget at the bottom of your screen. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Jason lives, works, and plays in Eugene, Oregon. He's been working in IT as a systems engineer, network engineer, and finally IT director for over 15 years. He's worked on the customer side of engineering solutions, working with vendors, and dealing with the buying end of technology prior to working with Quorum. Jason's been at Quorum for just over 2 years as a systems engineer and brings the customer perspective to the world of technology sales. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Snook.
Hey, thanks a lot, Amir. Again, thanks everyone for joining today. This is a new kind of presentation track that we've created today. I kind of been working on this in the background for a little while. When I was working in enterprise IT, one of the things that was really appealing to me personally was the advent of cloud technologies and being able to put instances in the cloud. And I learned a lot by building basically a hybrid infrastructure. This is at a previous position before jumping on with Quorum as a systems engineer. So I want to share some insights of lessons learned, when I think it's a good idea, when I think it might be possibly a bad idea to put some resources into a public cloud partner. So again, title today, When Cloud Recovery is going to Save the Day and When It Probably Will Not. A little bit about myself again. I live in Eugene, Oregon. I am definitely a fan of technology. Been around tech for many years. But when I'm free, I'm usually riding a bike or teaching my kids how to link up a turn on a snowboard. So it's a great place to live here in Eugene. We're having a beautiful 85-degree day, which is definitely better than most other times of the year. Real quick housekeeping. You can always chat in. You can always send some Q&A. Send the questions during the presentation as they come to mind. You don't have to wait till the very end. We'll get to them near the end of the hour. Again, I want to talk very briefly today about what I like to call the digital foundation of today's world. I want to talk about why it's important to protect it. This is going to be pretty obvious for a lot of people. And I want to throw out a few scenarios, a few ideas of putting your backup and recovery mechanism entirely into the cloud, or maybe building a hybrid solution where you've got some on-site and some out in the cloud. And then finally at the very end, I want to throw out 4 keys to protecting your IT investment. These are things, again, that as I've worked on the customer side and then working with Quorum on the business continuity side, I feel like I've learned and can provide some perspective on some things that you can do to protect your IT investment. And I'm just going to throw out quick 4 for you guys to consider. Let's do some introductions here. I'm gonna do this presentation based on Eddie. Eddie is our IT director. He's our sysadmin. Eddie's responsible for quite a bit. He's your standard background guy. He's the guy who has either wore a lot of hats. Maybe he started out as a sysadmin, dabbled in network engineering, maybe got into a little bit of DevOps or cloud infrastructure. But Eddie's the do-all guy. He's not the only one in our fictitious environment that we're going to talk to today, but he's probably a lot of people out in the audience today. With the exception of the weird glasses and the beard, Eddie's kind of my own persona. He's a guy who's seen a lot, done a lot in the IT space, and one of the things that always keeps Eddie up at night is trying to figure out how to keep complexity down. Make sure that you don't have downtime. Obviously, avoid things like ransomware, data loss, any sort of corruption issues. The whole premise behind what Eddie is worried about at night is how do I keep my systems online and I don't spend a ton of money doing it. So let's talk a little bit about what is on Eddie's mind. First thing is the company goals. Eddie's a seasoned IT pro. He knows that his paycheck comes from the company. If the company does well, he gets a paycheck. If the company doesn't do well, he may lose some staff. He may lose resources. His budget may get cut. I've worked in various companies within the enterprise IT side. And one of the more frustrating things I've gone through is when I don't have a budget. When my budget goes from X and it goes to X minus Y, it can be kind of a frustrating year. Not because we all love playing with new toys, but because you're expected to do so much, maintain the same level of uptime and stability while innovating with almost no budget. Having no budget in IT is always frustrating. So one way to keep your budget, help the company align IT with the strategic goals of the company. Try and figure out a way to innovate to beat the company's competitors. You know, if you're running with a company, I worked with a company for a while as a market research company, and one of the things we did is we innovated the way that we did data collection. Those annoying surveys that people get. Well, we were one of the first companies that were able to deploy a mobile survey. So instead of being tied to the 20 questions you got on your web browser, you could actually move that survey over to your phone. So that was one of the ways that that technology allowed us to innovate and allowed us, the company, to do better because of technology. That's Eddie's goal. I mean, again, keeping that company, keeping all the resources online, having time and effort to innovate, all while keeping the costs down. So on the other side of Eddie is how you actually, the practical side of this, how you actually get this done. Eddie's got a background in DevOps. He's got some cloud management experience. He's dabbled with AWS and Azure and even put in production workloads in one of the two. He either has some staff that is the DBA, the brains behind the data collection side. He's probably got some staff that help him out with sysadmin, desktop support, server administration, rolling out the common tenants that we always have within IT. What are those? Well, that's storage, that's servers, that's virtualization. That's basically the foundation that we use. That's that building that digital foundation. Eddie's got a whole lot on his plate. On top of that, he's got to worry about interconnectivity. He's got to worry about how do I maintain connectivity for all devices anywhere at any time. How do I make sure that things are secure? One of the things that a lot of times people can get overwhelmed with is the details of securing data, the details of how exactly if the worst happened, if someone came in your door, your digital door, and they compromised, locked, prevented access to, if they took away the 3 A's of security, what would the impact to Eddie? What would his impact be? Obviously, he's going to have a long day, but how badly would it actually impact the company? So there's a lot going on in his mind. Again, he's a guy that he's got to figure all of this out. This is the topic today is tailored towards this person. So uptime and security, how and how much? Well, uptime is obviously very, very critical to all organizations. I'm going to throw out some ideas here. If you're an organization that has some public cloud instances, again, let's talk about putting a workload up in Amazon AWS, or you're putting storage in S3, or you're using Azure, or you're using Rackspace or any other hybrid or any other public cloud provider. How do you secure it and how do you maintain uptime? Well, a lot of those guys have very cool elastic building systems. You can pay to have a DR site for a lot of public cloud providers. You can also, for public cloud, you can also build in redundancy and resiliency as part of the solution. But a lot of people are still dealing with on-prem IT resources. I'd say in the customers that I talk to, 75% of their digital foundation is still on-premise. It's still hardware and hypervisors and data centers that they are they're still working with. And I actually tend to think that that's going to be around for a long time. I don't think that we're quite near the age where we're treating IT resources as a utility, where you just pay for what you use and pay for what you need. I think that that's probably where we're going, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And I say that based on what I've seen in the industry in the last 2 years working with Quorum, and then what I saw in the industry as we went from the pizza box approach of servers to virtualization to eventually cloud. I think cloud adoption is definitely the way that that the world is trending, but we're not quite to the point where we can ditch the having to maintain the understanding of the network stack, understand the storage stack, enterprise applications. So uptime, again, the way that you maintain uptime for public cloud and on-prem, it's pretty different. There's completely different technologies out there that will provide resiliency for both solutions. So again, the uptime here is goal. Company does well if you're online. The challenge is ongoing. The challenge is the ability to keep systems online regardless of the outage. So when we say regardless of the outage, a lot of people will say, okay, well, I need a business continuity solution because I'm afraid of a storm, or I've got a compliance or regulatory demand that says that I have to keep things online. But more and more, what we're seeing is that customers are needing resiliency because of malicious activity. So ransomware, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But goal, when you say uptime, shift the paradigm to thinking, what happens when things just break because of power outage or because of a storm? Think of, if your system goes down, what is the impact to you, the customers, your company, the internal people at your company? What does that look like? Throw out a few stats here that I pulled. The average cost of downtime is for the enterprise side is about $100,000. Ransomware is a big one. I mean, we're looking at potential damage. This is just damage. This is not paid. It's probably going to come in the neighborhood of $5 billion in 2017. That's a big number. This is worldwide. This is a problem that is cascading from east to west and north to south. The most recent one, the Payed ransomware, it was found that it actually goes beyond just locking files. It's actually designed to delete boot level files. Think about that for a second. Boot level files, what are they? Well, those are the files that are responsible for allowing an operating system to boot. If you don't have those files, your OSs don't boot. If you don't have the OSs, it's pretty hard to do a file level restore. It's pretty hard to resurrect a server where they've got a deep infested compromised machine. So these are the things that are on our friend Eddie's mind, and his challenge, again, is to maintain uptime. So the question behind that challenge is, well, how do I back up? How do I maintain uptime for this mirage of IT resources? Again, the digital foundation could be some in cloud, some on-prem, even some connections to partners might maintain uptime or required uptime. So how do you achieve uptime for this complex scenario? And where and how much? Where do you put your backup strategy, and how much do you spend? There's some common approaches. There's the cloud-only approach. There's the on-prem only approach, and then there's the hybrid approach, which is a little bit on-site and a little bit off-site. And there's also things like array replication. I put that in here because a lot of people will replicate SAN from point A to point B, or replicate their VM host from point A to point B, and that's good enough for them. There are so many different ways to maintain uptime. What we're talking about today, though, is when is using a cloud-only backup. When does it work? And I've come up with a few scenarios, and I've actually, even this morning, I came up with a few more that's not going to be presented here. But again, we take our complex environment of some on-site, some off-site. What if we shifted everything, not only what you have on-prem, but a copy of all your instances at, say, AWS? What if you shifted all of those and backed all those up to a cloud provider? That seems on the surface a pretty good way and a pretty potentially easy way to gain business continuity, to get to the point where you're protecting everything in a public cloud resource. No on-prem, right? We're talking about direct-to-cloud backups here. Now, when does that work? Well, in my mind, it works quite a few different scenarios. It's going to work. If you have an IT team that has robust networking, it's going to work. What do I mean by robust networking? Well, any sort of SDN deployment is going to be ideal here for cloud-based failover. When I'm talking cloud-based failover, I mean if you have an outage of any resource, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud, what does it take to actually bring it back up? Robust networking with SDN would allow you to quickly fail over from external pointers that are going to on-prem and cloud up to someone else's cloud, your cloud backup provider or partner. So if you have robust networking, meaning dynamic DNS, meaning SDN, an internal staff where you can manage networking failover extremely easy, and you have plenty of bandwidth to shift from your data center to someone else's data center, then cloud backup is definitely an approach that you need to look at, because you'll probably have a fairly successful outing with it. So when auto-scaling is built in, all right, auto-scaling, if you guys have ever used AWS, auto-scaling is a core tenet of AWS. And it's fantastic. I mean, if you go from 1 server to 10 based on load, back in the day, we rolled out physical load balancers, let's say by company by F5. That was great for networking, but gosh, on the back-end side, the database and the web app side, that was pretty hard to scale up during say, a new rollout. Well, auto-scaling with AWS and Azure's version of that is fantastic for that. So if you are using auto-scaling, then you're probably going to want to back everything up to a cloud provider who also does auto-scaling. So again, that's another tenet where I truly believe that if that's built into your environment, you're going to have really good success backing up directly to the cloud. If your CFO says, I am ready to pay as I go, meaning I don't want a capital expense, I want an OpEx, I want that operational expense model, cloud backups are the way to go. Cloud backups are, you are going to pay for what you use and when you use it. Now, beware, I'm going to get into this later, but beware of the scope creep for cloud, any sort of cloud resources. But again, if the CFO says, listen, we're a company that has great cash flow, we would much rather pay as we go, then a cloud-based backup solution is going to get you to that point. That's that OpEx experience that a lot of people are looking at. Now, if you're a company that thinks that you would rather buy and own and that CapEx experience is better, cloud backup is not the way to go. You're going to end up wishing that you had some sort of wholly owned backup solution in-house and something that you don't pay a lot for on the cloud side. Again, if you're highly invested in cloud instances, here's a number to throw out. I think that customers with 75% on-prem or more should probably steer clear of cloud backups. I throw out 75% because I look at where the workload is. So if the workload is, majority of it is at your data center, if you push it to a cloud, you're now dealing with something that is a completely different experience as opposed to running the infrastructure yourself. If you're maybe 50-50, then by all means look at backing up to a public cloud provider directly, because you've already got the skill set in-house to manage a cloud experience. I'm talking about these DevOps guys that have programming experience, multi-talented people who are versed in not only local infrastructure but pushing to cloud instances. If you're a company that does not live by any sort of regulatory compliance, then a public cloud backup provider is going to fit the bill. Now, if you're a company like a bank, healthcare, financial or insurance underwriter, anything where you have a government regulation saying you must do X, Y, and Z, I'm pretty sure that most public cloud backup providers will not work for you. Well, why is that? Public cloud backup vendors use shared infrastructure. They use the idea that everyone's going to sit on the same physical device with minimal logical firewalled segmentations between one another, and they're not going to guarantee you that your data will not bleed over to another person's data. They're also not going to be able to say we've passed SOC 2 compliance, we've passed HIPAA, we've passed PCI compliance. A lot of public cloud vendors are not going to give you that peace of mind security-wise, not only for your internal expectations, but to meet regulatory compliance. So if you're a company that has no regulatory compliance needs, cloud backup is definitely something you should consider. Now finally, minimal partner connections. I say minimal because if you're dealing with any sort of federation, federating if in a failover scenario, let's say you're federated via link to 10 of your best partners, and you rely on that federation, your normal day-to-day workflow has now very much heavily relies on the ability to instantly IM, chat, share desktop privately to one of your partners. Cloud backup or cloud failover is not the way that you go. And the reason being is creating partner connections from a public cloud provider is not an easy process. try and build out a solution where you have a secure tunnel between, let's say, a direct-to-cloud recovery solution or even AWS to one of your partners. It can be done, but you're adding a layer of complexity and you're adding a layer of security vulnerability that your partner may not be happy with. So if you have partner connections, by all means, if you have minimal partner connections, by all means look at cloud connectivity. The other thing that I added here, that I want to add here that's actually not shown, is if you're a company that has a lot of cold data meaning if you have a long RTO for a data set, by all means, backing up directly to the cloud is a great option. Why? Well, you don't pay a lot for storing data in the cloud. I mean, Amazon Glacier, the last time I checked, it's pretty affordable. There's another company out there, CrashPlan or CrashPlan Pro. They do a great job of storing cold data. So if you're a company that's got a lot of cold archival data that you want to stick up in the cloud for DR purposes, direct to cloud is definitely something to consider. If you're a company that has leverage containers like Docker, cloud backup is also a fantastic way to go. You can actually mirror Docker containers from one site to another site. That secondary site could be your DRaaS or it could be your cloud backup provider. So if you're that company that's leveraged containers or if you've got cold data, by all means check into direct to cloud backup because it's probably going to be a pretty good fit for you. Remember one thing. Getting backup data into the cloud is the easy part. It's flexible, it's scalable, it's robust, and it is easy to get started with. Now, when is it maybe not such a good idea? Let's talk about the cost of backing up to the cloud, the true cost. So how do you get a predictable recovery cost? What does that mean? Well, that means if your Exchange DAG goes down, what does it cost you to bring it back up? If your money-making CRM application goes down, goes offline, becomes corrupt, you need to fail it over for some reason, what will it cost you to recover that system? Is it predictable, meaning you know exactly how much you're going to be charged as soon as you hit the green button that says go? If it's not predictable, you're going to want to do some math and try and figure out how much is it going to cost me to run in someone else's cloud. That runtime charge can be based on multiple factors. Let's start with network. You could be charged on ingress and egress. You could be charged on the storage side, obviously, for how much storage you need to get those applications up and running. And then finally, you're going to be charged for compute. And all of that starts a timer as soon as you fail over. So are you likely to fail over for a test? Maybe not. Are you likely to run a full DR test if you know that you're going to get a $3,000 bill from your backup provider because you turned them all on? Maybe not. So there's some true hidden costs behind using cloud backups. Do your own due diligence to find out how much will it cost me to run my instances in the cloud should I have to fail over. Don't forget to figure out how much you're going to have to pay for support. A lot of direct-to-cloud backup vendors will charge extra for support, or they'll kick support over to the partner. I love partners. I love working with consultants who know more than I do. What I don't like doing is dealing with consultants and partners who are the support face of another company. And the reason being, the company that designed the technology should always be the person who you're talking to for help. Why is that? Well, they designed it. They know all the ins and outs of that technology. The partner, the support partner, they did not design it. They are immediately in a position where it's a challenge for them to do tier 2, 3, and 4 support. So that's one of the things to keep in mind is how much will you be charged for support if you need to use it. I mentioned this before. I want to mention it again. How much do you get charged if you have to pay to test your backup and DR solution? Run those numbers by and find out what the true cost is. Remember, cloud providers are not a charity. Margin is built in. Beware of the billing creep. Print that out, put it on a yellow sticky. Cloud providers, almost all technology providers for that matter, they're not a charity. They're there to make money. So don't get lured into the extremely inexpensive startup costs where you put all your data and your instances into a cloud provider and then all of a sudden you're hit with a sticker shock once you actually turn them on. Do your due diligence and find out what the true cost of cloud backup is. Cloud recovery speed. Listen, speed matters, period. If it takes you a long time to fail over, and a long time I mean more than 5 or 10 minutes, you're doing it wrong. We live in an age where failover should be almost instantaneous. If you lose, let's say for example, you had 1 terabyte of data that was locked by ransomware, how long will it take you to pull that data from your cloud provider back to production? 1 terabyte of data could take a little while. Is it more than 10 minutes? Yeah. Is it more than 30 minutes? It absolutely is. So if you're going direct to cloud and you need to restore a volume, you're going to be in a painful spot of telling people, hey, listen, I'm pulling, don't stop streaming videos because I need all the bandwidth. So cloud recovery speed is one of those things that if you compare, it is not an apples to apples comparison. If you have a local on-prem, a modern local on-prem backup solution, you can be back up in less than 10 minutes, guaranteed. If you do cloud only, 30 minutes would be amazing. 30 minutes is not realistic. It's going to probably be more than 30 minutes. It all depends on what you're having to restore. If you restore, obviously, if you restore locally, you get LAN speeds. A lot to be said for having LAN speeds if you've got a server outage. Cloud recovery is going over best effort network, what we call the internet, what I've always called the best effort network. And now, not to get on a political tangent, but now with politics changing and potentially throttling speeds and giving higher speeds to providers, that could become an even more challenging issue to get near LAN speeds over a cloud connection or to your cloud partner. And finally, what if you are one of the many companies who are adopting an all-flash data center? Well, if you do an all-flash data center and you want that same IOP performance, you guys know what IOPs are, input output per second. If you guys want the same IOP performance in the cloud, you are going to pay a hefty fee just to get close. Compute to storage access remains, from what I can tell, at around 20 gig per second. That's a far cry from the latest NVMe cache SSD cards. So if you're a company who relies on fast transactions, cloud backups or cloud recovery, it might bite you because you're going to pay a lot for SSD speeds. I know when I looked into it from AWS, they offer it, and it goes up to 20 gig per second, but it is pretty expensive to create an S3 volume that's all SSD. A lot more expensive than if you were to build out your own SSD SAN and then replicate, for example, or leverage a hybrid or leverage a backup provider that already has SSD by default. So this is something that you need to consider, cloud recovery speed. So let's talk about ransomware again. Will cloud-only DR beat ransomware? Well, in that scenario, again, if you have a 1 terabyte volume locked, how long, what's the cost of the network egress to get it down? Not even withstanding how long it will take you to get back up and running, but how much is it going to cost you to egress that traffic? The time it's going to take to push the recovered files. What about running from a known good state in the cloud? If you back up everything to the latest and greatest cloud-only backup provider, can you boot up a VM or an instance or a copy of a physical server from 2 days ago? You had better be able to, because the way that you get around ransomware is to boot from a known good state a couple snapshots previous. So make sure that your cloud DR has the ability to boot up an instance from way back in the past. How about full DNS transparency? What do I mean by this? Well, if ransomware takes down your internal DNS, for example, do you have a way, does your cloud provider have a way of mimicking everything that you did locally and publicly DNS-wise? Is it time to look at a cloud-based dynamic DNS solution like, let's say, DynDNS, which is a fantastic solution for alleviating some of the public DNS concerns that ransomware can bring up? And then finally, what if ransomware impacts a traditional API-based application? I know that we've been migrating a lot of applications to the cloud. Office 365 is a great example. There are project management applications that we used to have in-house. There are medical apps that we used to have in-house. And now they're all cloud-based, meaning you access them via a web browser. That's fantastic. Or an app. That's great. What about those old API apps? I say old. They're still relevant in today's world. If you open up a client on your Windows desktop and it is expecting LAN speeds to give you the expected result, Cloud-only backups is going to leave you frustrated. How are you going to get API-based LAN speeds over a cloud instance? You're going to pay a lot in bandwidth to get to that point. So will Cloud DR beat ransomware? In a lot of cases, it's probably not. It's going to be good for that cold data, but it's probably not going to get you back up in a reasonable amount of time. So I want to take a moment here, and I want to kind of jump off the tracks here, and I want to talk about what we call a ransomware guide. Ransomware guide, I'm going to go through this super quick because it's not necessarily the topic today. What if ransomware hits? Listen, backup should be close to the inner circle of your IT environment. You should have a full layer of security that prevents it from getting in, but if it does get in, you got to have a backup solution that will get you out of the ditch. So what if the protection fails? Well, step one, disconnect the compromised server. Step two, check the entire environment to see if it crawled. Did it crawl from one file server to another? Do you have DFS in place and it impacted multiple shares? If it did, make sure you get all those servers offline. Next thing, before you jump to recovery, you want to find patient zero. Patient zero is that Mary in accounting who screwed up and she got tricked into downloading a fictitious Windows update, which in fact was Mr. Ransomware itself. Send Mary home for the day, get her PC offline. That's called patient zero. Just disconnect it. We'll deal with her later. After that, what do? Well, now it's time to recover. The recovery mechanism that I'm talking about is being able to instantly turn on copies of your servers from a known good state. Instantly meaning a click of a button will bring up a copy of your server from a couple hours ago or a couple days ago or even a month ago. Doesn't really matter the time frame. You should be able to instantly power up a known good state of your server because the goal here is to A, obviously, never ever be tempted to pay the ransom, and B, get users back online. Downtime costs a lot of money, and ransomware is in my opinion, a kind of a silly thing to lose productivity to. So get the servers back online, deal with fixing the compromised servers later. Once you have launched that recovery mechanism, start running from it. Now you can focus your attention on the deep clean. You could focus it on the deep clean because all the users are back up and running. They're running on your recovery solution. Once you do the deep clean could be nuke and pave. The deep clean could be forensic analysis. It could be scrubbing of the file system. It could be a file level restore. It could even be, I'm going to throw this out here, what if you had the ability to rebuild your main production server using a known good state and rebuild it while your users are still online on the recovery mechanism? Bare metal recovery. What if you were able to do an incremental BMR from a known good state and say, listen, I don't trust my forensic analysis. I don't trust my AV. I just want to rebuild my server from a known good state. I want to make it look like last Tuesday, for example. Well, your recovery solution, in my opinion, should have that ability to not only get you back online, but to help you rebuild your production servers. There's my guide. I tried to get it done in less than a couple minutes. I hope that ransomware guide is useful. Again, we should have this slide presentation as a handout. I'll make sure that that's available for everyone here. These particular slides have always been very valuable, well received, and I hope you guys get something from that as far as the ransomware discussion. Okay, let's change scopes here, change the path. Again, let's get back to our original path. We've talked a little bit about when it's tempting and when it's a good idea to consider doing direct-to-cloud backups and recovery. Let's change the way that we think about this, though. What is a better way to keep your peace of mind? Again, internal expectations, always on world. Nobody's got time for downtime anymore. A hybrid solution, I believe, is a better way to do it. And the reason being, you get high-speed recovery, you get high-speed LAN access, you also get that peace of mind of a cloud business continuity solution. So you kind of get it all in one. You get a solution where you know exactly what you're going to pay for. You can test it in any time. It's fast to fail over. There are zero hidden charges. With the hybrid solution, you know exactly what you're paying for. You know exactly what you're getting. So I've always considered this before starting to work for Quorum. When you're looking at a backup vendor, The best ones out there focus their engineering efforts on recovery. The worst ones focus on how to back things up. If they spend a lot of time engineering, software engineering, a way to back up and rebuild the wheel to get application consistent backups, they're doing it wrong. You're dealing with the wrong vendor, period. The best vendors out there spend all their time figuring out, hey, how do I get the best recovery? How do I make sure that my customers can recover almost instantly? And that is where your efforts should reside in. So the hybrid data protection world, where I'm backing up locally, I'm backing up my cloud, either cloud to cloud or cloud to on-prem. I have full flexibility on where I keep my backup sets, and more importantly, recovery is fast, simple, very, very easy to use to where anyone can do it, and you know exactly what you're paying for. That's a better way to keep your peace of mind. So why does the hybrid cloud make sense? Well, it gives you an RTO of less than 5 minutes. Remember RTO, that's recovery time objective. That's your willingness to have downtime. If you're good with downtime of 5 minutes, hybrid cloud, having that on-prem solution is the way to go. RPO, if you need multiple backup points per day, like every hour, on-prem / hybrid is the way to go. If you need a what's called in the market CDP, continuous data protection, you're going to need a more advanced solution. You're going to need something that has the ability to trickle changes, almost like a clustered environment. That is definitely possible, but that is more along the lines of removing the hybrid piece and actually having a partner data center where you're trickling changes almost instantaneously. Let me throw out another R acronym, RPE, Recovery Performance Expectation. Meaning, if you're that customer that just invested X number of dollars into that all-flash data center, because now they are finally becoming somewhat affordable, and you have applications running on that SSD data center, and everyone expects a particular IOPS speed, well, you had better consider your backup solution to find out if it has the same IOPS. IOPS meaning input-output per second. Let me throw out some metrics. The old traditional way of deploying virtual machines was to have a piece of hardware, put a hypervisor on it to abstract the hardware, and then do all the read writes through the hypervisor itself. That'll yield about 1,000, maybe 1,200 IOPS for your best hypervisor. Reason being, IOPS are kind of resource-hungry machines. They don't abstract read writes as well as they should. So if you have invested in SSD flash, you're probably doing something that's called hypervisor pass-through, which means direct path to compute, direct path to storage. You're probably seeing something in the neighborhood of 25,000 IOPS with one of those. So if you're getting that in the production world, you had better get that in the failover world or the backup world as well. So RPE is something that you should consider and that should be part of your planning process. Obviously, cost. I'm a big fan of knowing what I'm paying for. If I go down and buy a car, I want to know the bottom price. I don't want to be tricked a year later into saying, hey, if I drive 15,000 miles, I owe a lot more money. I'm not a big fan of that. I like fixed costs. Call me crazy, but I like to know what I'm paying for. Hybrid cloud is going to get you there. What does it cover? Hybrid cloud is specifically designed to cover everything. Your virtual machines from any hypervisor, your cloud instances from any cloud provider, your physical servers that are still relevant, any data sets that are stored on shared media, anything should be covered by your hybrid cloud provider. I'm also a big fan of single vendor does all. I like that terminology, single throat to choke, meaning if I have a problem with my backup provider, I don't want to have to call two different providers, one for physical, one for virtual, and another, maybe even another for backing up my cloud instances. I want one guy to call if I have a problem. And that is what hybrid cloud gets you, hybrid backup cloud. We're talking DRaaS here. DRaaS is disaster recovery as a service. That's one of the core tenets of DRaaS is being a single vendor that can do it all. So let's talk about the 4 keys that I have for better recovery. Now the first one is what I just mentioned. It's the one solution for all. Again, I'm a big fan of being able to dial 1-800-HELP and get the person who's responsible for protecting all of my servers regardless of where they are, what they are, or where the data is. So if I have a problem replicating an S3 container from Amazon to my cloud backup provider, I want that person to be the same person I call if I have some sort of say a snapshot failure on one of my local physical servers. Having one vendor, especially in the backup world, is incredibly powerful. Here's why. Think of backups as you got to have them. Think of them almost as insurance. You don't want to spend a lot of time managing your backup system because if you go back to the very first slide, one of Eddie's main tenets is to be able to innovate. You can't innovate if you're worrying about backups all the time. It's difficult to provide stability in an environment if you've got multiple vendors who point the finger at one another. So the one vendor for all is an incredibly powerful key to having a very successful backup and recovery solution. Next one is demand the quick RTO. RTO, again, recovery time objective. 5 minutes is good. 5 minutes is where everyone should be at. If RTO is an hour, that is a long time, in my opinion, to be down. If I have a mechanism that allows me to get back up and running in 5 minutes or less, I'm more than likely to use it at the drop of a hat. So that is number 2. Demand a quick RTO. Why do you demand it? We live in a day and age where technically it's possible. If someone is giving you an RTO of an hour, you're dealing with the wrong vendor, period. Number 3, archiving has got to be part of BDR. There are so many times in my previous enterprise life where I backed up stuff for 2 weeks, and sure enough, I'm going to use Marion Accounting, comes to me a month later saying, hey, I need this file from a month ago. I changed it a month ago. What can you do for me? Well, that's an internal expectation where I'd love to have archiving. If you have regulatory compliance demanding long-term data retention, you got to have archiving. Isn't it frustrating to have an archiving vendor and a backup vendor? Don't they kind of do the same thing? Well, again, one vendor should do it all. They should do data protection and archiving. So archiving, in my opinion, should be part of your BDR. BDR, a backup and disaster recovery plan, should be the same vendor. 4, there is nothing worse than turning on a solution that you haven't looked at in 6 months and having it not work. Testing has got to be done automatically, and it also has to have an ability to do it manually without impacting production or causing extra charge, extra money. Number 4 is always about testing. Testing is one of those things where it is so easy to turn on your latest and greatest technical solution and forget about it for a couple months and just think that it's running. But if you actually have the ability to not only have it automatically self-test in the background and tell you when things are going right and tell you when things are going wrong, that's a powerful change. If you have the ability to test the solution without bumping it into production, meaning how do you do a live test of a multi-server application suite at your DR? Well, in a lot of companies, that's a challenge that you're gonna lose a weekend to. With the right vendor, you're going to be able to do that during working hours without ever stepping onto production. So number 4 is all about testing. So we're getting to that point now. We're going to jump it over 2 questions here in just a minute. I want to talk about very quickly, give you the rundown on Quorum. Quorum is the solution that I, as an enterprise IT guy, had been looking for years. It seemed like all the guys, the big names out there, the ArcServe, the Symantec, even for a while there, even guys like Veeam, they were just doing it wrong. It was a solution where I had to spend a lot of time managing it. There were hidden costs because I had to buy hardware. The cloud replication was done by another person. Finally, Quorum came along and fixed all that. It is the turnkey data protection in a box. It is the ability to turn over all of your backup, DR, and business continuity needs to one vendor. With us, you can recover almost instantaneously. You can recover to the cloud. You can recover locally. You can replicate to your secondary site. You can do anything, for example, that you want. You can pull backups from your cloud partners. We encrypt everything at rest because we take security extremely seriously. All of our data centers are found in private data centers. We do not leverage public cloud instances. Reason being, again, we love security. We want to make sure that data is safe and it never gets out. Archiving for us is native, and you get unlimited local and DR testing. It is finally that one vendor that does it all, and we do it fast. We've got other videos and other webinars that talk about speed. Let me just throw this out there. We leverage NVMe cache. NVMe cache is awesome. The reason being, we get to do all read writes to cache speed before sending it to inexpensive slow disk. It's like having SSD speed at HDD price. SSDs are about $250 per terabyte. Hard drives are about $50 per terabyte, give or take. You get the $50 price, and you get the SSD speed. That is what we've designed into our solution. Very quickly, where does it sit? Our core functionality is backup. We dedupe, we replicate, we compress. We give you a solution where you can instantly recover. You can use it as a sandbox. You can always use this as a migration tool, so it goes beyond just backup and disaster recovery. The main parts of us are instantly being able to recover. Where does it sit? Well, it sits right at your local data center, and then you replicate to either Quorum's private cloud or your secondary data center. You can pull backups from Amazon, AWS, Azure. Doesn't matter where your VMs live or physical servers live. We have a solution that's going to fit for you guys. So check us out. I don't want to make this into a big sales pitch. I want to make this more about learning why I think direct-to-cloud recovery will work and when I don't think it will work. So with that, we're getting kind of close to the top of the hour. Amir, let's jump it over to questions, please.
Oh, absolutely, Jason. I have a handful of them here for you. Let me start off with the first one. Question is, if I have a mix of virtual and physical servers, do I need more than one backup or DVR vendor?
No, not in my opinion. You got to have one. One vendor does it all. One vendor, again, physical, virtual, from any hypervisor, by the way, or any cloud instance. You should be able to pull your backups down to one vendor. My opinion, no. Everybody's got a little bit of everything. You should have one backup vendor that does it all.
Great. Next question we have here is, what about failing over DNS? If I have partial cloud infrastructure and on-prem hardware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is not something that Quorum does specifically, but I'll give you my take on it after doing this for years. Having a flexible DNS structure where you've got internal zones and you've got external zones where you've got public-facing entities, look into Dyne DNS or any other of the variant dynamic DNS solutions. Check with your ISP to find out what sort of redirects they offer. It's been something that the technology has been out there for years, but it's just now being adopted mainstream by, mid-size and down. So check out dynamic DNS solutions. It's a great way to fail over an entire site instantly.
Next question, Jason. What's the archiving frequency? How many versions get saved? If not, does it get deleted or replaced on FIFO basis?
Yeah, I mean, archiving is above and beyond retention. Retention is typically 40 days, meaning you're going to take a snap every hour and you're going to keep it for 40 days. That's your everyday average retention time these days. Archiving will take that same retention and hold it in a placeholder every single month until the quarter hits. And then it's going to hold the quarter back up. And then it's going to hold 3 more months and another quarter back up. And then it's going to go out and it's going to hold that year. So what does that allow you to restore from? Let's say you've got 7 years of retention. You would be able to restore a file from March 1st of 2012, whatever the year is that you've got 7 years worth of backups, or you could restore the quarterly, or you could restore the monthly from another month from another year. So archiving frequency is essentially monthly, quarterly, and yearly for as long as you want. We're going to build in enough storage when you tell us how much archiving you need.
Next question. How does Quorum BMR compare with Norton's cloud backup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk more about Quorum's BMR. I'm not intimately familiar with Norton's cloud backup. I will tell you this. The way that we replicate your site to our site is I've never seen it cleaner. And the reason being is we do incremental forever, we do global deduplication, and then we compress. We do all that. So when you're replicating from point A to point B, you're only replicating small blocks of change data. It's not even metadata changes, meaning if a file changed, we don't even move the whole file. We only move the parts of the file that changed. So if you've got a 100 gig file that was updated, but with 2 megs, we're only going to move the 2 megs. And we're only doing that, and we're doing that every time we snap that server. So if you do hourly snapshots, you're going to instantly replicate that hourly snapshot over to the DR side. Not sure how that ties in with Norton. That's just the backup part. Now the recovery part with us, you can literally go to a dashboard, power on the copy of the server either locally or remotely from the same dashboard, and get back up and running.
All right, another question here for you, Jason. Can you speak to Quorum's federal regulatory compliance, ITAR, HIPAA, FERPA certification, and whether or not the audit is conducted by outside auditors?
Yeah, so yeah, the audits that we go through for PCI, SOC 2, and HIPAA are done by outside vendors. Those are that's the main hit list of our government regulatory compliance that we stay in practice with. I'd have to check with our internal guys to see if we're ITAR and FERPA compliant. I know that we're PCI, I know that we're HIPAA, and I know that all of our data centers are SOC 2 compliant. Again, the others, there's various regulatory compliance out there. I'd have to find out to what level if we still audit with those guys, but I do know for a fact that our auditing is done by an external org.
Okay. Is it best to do a trial or a dress rehearsal for a PC backup? What is the best way to do this?
Ooh, PC backup. It's kind of out of the wheelhouse of Quorum. I'll tell you what I've done in the past. So Quorum can back up PCs. PC obviously is going to have to be local to the on-prem device. We're not going to back it up directly to the cloud. But generally speaking, I would advise people to back up PC data for those critical PCs. If you need a copy of the PC, see if you can virtualize it. Do a P2V conversion. We can do that for you. We'll show you how to do it. But when you're talking about dress rehearsal, you're talking about testing. With us, you can test without stepping on production, and the way that you do that is you introduce virtual NICs. So you'll introduce basically create an entire virtual network, boot up a copy of your PC and/or servers, and they will all be playing in the same sandbox. That way you can do testing without having an IP address conflict.
Okay, a couple more questions here. How would I do a recovery test if I'm using a hybrid DRAS solutions?
Yeah, the hybrid DRAS solution, the disaster recovery as a service solution is going to allow you to spin up copies of servers locally, meaning on the local appliance, or remotely out in Quorum's private cloud. You can at any time do that without stepping on production. You can run a full DR failover test at your convenience at your time. So yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to do. It's one of our core tenets. A lot of guys do this, but I feel like we do a very good job of creating a separate sandbox network for people to use.
All right, and how does this system integrate with our existing infrastructure or backup strategy?
It's going to plug right in. We have our appliances that we send on site. They've got the network stack, the storage stack. They've got compute. They've got the hypervisor, and then they've got the manageability to tie it all together. So it is literally going to sit next to whatever you have in production and make a copy of it. Think of it as literally a copy of your data center held locally and remotely.
All right. Well, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank Jason for his information and his informative presentation. Special thanks to our audience for taking time to attend and participate, as well as provide questions. And a large thank you to Quorum for presenting this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks all.